Hi, my name is Kimberly Lancaster. I'm here to present Concussion 2015 and take a deeper dive into its psychological themes. So I hope you want to join me on the journey as we find out what psychological themes are weaved throughout the plot in Concussion 2015. Here we're going to first take a background about the movie's plot. Will be our first stop on our journey. We'll find out some more about Dr. Bennet Omalu, who is a forensic neuropathologist that makes this discovery of CTE after he ended up performing the first autopsy on Mike Webster, who was a Pittsburgh Steeler that died from complications of CTE. Dr. Omalu was from Nigeria, Africa. His name itself means, if you know, you must come forth and speak. That was the surname chosen by his father, who was an Igbo tribe leader, and he fights a battle between trying to find his identity and become an American citizen, because when he finds this discovery, he is still an immigrant working on a work visa for the coroner's office in that town in Pennsylvania. And he is always fighting by trying to stay true to his ethics and his African heritage, while also trying to find his American identity. So there's a war between assimilation and acculturation going on in Dr. Omalu's personal life and his own ethics. We're going to see the psychology themes that play throughout the presentation. You will see me notate the chapter themes, the course themes, and the movie themes 1, 2, and 3 throughout the presentation. We will cover the significance of the topics centered around that CTE and fighting for advocacy for the players' risk to be reduced when they are playing, or for them to be properly recognized as injured and taken care of after they suffer these injuries on behalf of the NFL. The key plot lessons presented by Concussion 2015. The film Concussion 2015 delves into various psychological themes that are intricately linked to the storyline concerning chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, and the repercussions of concussions on sports professionals through the portrayal of Dr. Bennet Omalu and the former NFL players who have suffered from brain injuries. 3 significant psychological themes emerge within the narrative. We have movie theme 1, that's trying to put scientific truth against what the NFL's bureaucracy is covering up for the sake of America's game, the impact of cumulative trauma on those NFL players' lives and brains and their families' lives, and then the hometown hero persona that goes on throughout the movie and their legacy. All we have to do is finish the game is a major achievement, motivation, and bias that is weaved throughout the story. They're always telling them it's all about the game, it's all about winning, and that sacrifice is part of winning. So these gentlemen, when they start to talk in the car about the symptoms they're experiencing, they don't know it's CTE because they keep telling them they're fine, and they're not finding it on the scans when they go to see Dr. Bell's, is they're dealing with that amnesia that's either retrograde or anterograde, which is retrograde before, anterograde after the fact. So they're teetering on those, and that's covered in Chapter 7. Was first discovered doing studies on a gentleman that had had elective epilepsy surgery and was known as HM, and was studied by Smith colleagues and also Corbin 84 and 02 with Sorville and Millen in 1957, 84, and 2002 to see how these levels of amnesia occur. The achievement motive is a desire to conquer and have high standards. So they had high standards for themselves, so it was really shameful for them to admit what was going on with their memory. And the achievement bias and the achievement motives come from research from McClellan as the achievement motive 1953 to 85. And the motivation bias is researched by Mazzelius in 04 and Berger in 86. So really that was telling their players and blame their external factors, their homelessness and things that happen as a result of this. They attributed success to their internal organization and all the good it did for the community and didn't want to find any fault in themselves. So that was their downfall on this. This scene is attached to movie themes 2 and 3 and the psychology concepts and of course themes B and C, as you can see here on the screen. Throwing drugs at C2E related symptoms is what they did. Dr. Jillian Bells here, played by Alec Baldwin, said that they would get them to medicate the players quickly to get them back in the game, get them going as long as they could until they became so broken they had to retire them. This is surrounding psychology concepts, ideas related to the course themes C and E. Of course, these are biased perceptions which they are filtering information and evaluating these gentlemen's conditions upon. Psychological, social, and cultural factors are influencing their behavior and mental processes. He medicates him with the Halidol to try to break these psychotic and insomnia episode. He comes to his office after he decides he couldn't cope anymore on his own and tries to take care of himself after the urging of Justin Cieselzek. And that goes along with our Chapter 5, Altering Consciousness with Drugs, Chapter 13, Coping, and movie themes 1, 2, and 3 in that scene.
At Wayfair, free.
The NFL self-serving bias from Chapter 12 regarding players' health risk, movie themes 1, 2, and 3, psychology concepts idea aligned with theme E, was a huge theme throughout this movie and something that will continually come back up, and what Dr. Omalu and Dr. Bells working together battled. I already, as I stated, players were constantly given multiple drugs from opiates, antipsychotics. Addiction was not thought about. They didn't care how it would affect their minds. The disease that they caused them the worst from the concussion standpoint was not found on the neural imaging that was covered in Chapter 3. And also the players were made to think their failure had some external outside cause, and that is the core hallmark of self-serving bias that is covered in Chapter 12. And then we'll take a look at how the medical model views abnormal behavior and diseases affecting socially desirable behavior, such as the symptoms the players were exhibiting from the CTE that was destroying their brains. Abnormal behavior is viewed as a disease. Opponents suggest the medical model has possibly outlived its usefulness as an effective diagnostic model in patients with NFL players, which it does have its limitations, as we see in this. It took a post-mortem exam. The medical model is notorious for labeling and stigmatization. That did happen to these gentlemen. They were stigmatized by their own families because of it. Thomas Sand, 74 and 90, is actually one of the researchers that is responsible for some of the thought processes and themes you will see the NFL say about these players' conditions, like they can't have a mental problem, this can't happen from concussions. And he also shifted abnormal behavior from a symptom of a disease, like these men had an actual CTE disease that Dr. Omalu discovered, to one of maladaptive behavior, such as the homelessness, the result of actually the disease process and the mental decline, deterioration of the brain causing the maladaptive and the living situation, not the other way around that Cezaz actually posited. So here we're going to see theme A, that psychological silence relies on empirical evidence and adapts as new data develop, overlaps course theme A to our E. We know we're looking through our perceptions and biases, and the bias is going to be the gentleman in here that Dr. Omalu went to a world-renowned neurologist to get his help, is also going to have to go with the science over his own bias of loving football, So all through this, we're going to see the scientific method used, which is in Chapter 2, the research enterprise in psychology. The father of that method and of optics is Ibn al-Haytham. That was covered in our video to go along with our chapter on that Edpuzzle video. We have direct observation of brain tissue on the slide, so that is going to be using that research method. We were going to have to bracketing the observer experience bias due to co-author's high regard for football in Chapter 2 once again. The naturalistic observation by Hayman et al. 2014 is in our Chapter 2. The research enterprise, and then Dr. Omalu, played by Will Smith, uses Charles Darwinism evolutionary principles thought to compare various animals' ability to withstand different G-forces, and the one that he picks out is the woodpecker. It's actually in our book as well, in the adaptive theory, that it can withstand up to so many G-forces and does millions of pecks on wood in a lifetime. But a human brain can only withstand 60 G-forces, and a football collision during a tackle or standard play or defense play is 100 G-forces. And unlike them, our tongue doesn't wrap around our head like a safety belt. So he posits that we are not designed to play football from our biology. And then they're trying to overcome the correlation versus causation, because a case study, as you know, can be declared in science is not enough proof. You need actually 3 cases, because we have a 3 trial rule in the scientific method. Here we're going to be observing the glial deterioration of unknown etiology missed on neural imaging, and using rational thinking about health from chapters 3, 13, and 14 movie themes 1 and 2. The diagnosis is the medical context. It's covered in Chapter 14. The etiology also is covered in 14. Refers to a root cause. He's finding the root cause. Prognosis, it means disease course outcomes. Then they knew that it was making the men go mad and have death or commit suicide. The glial cells are the glue. You can see that in the brain, and they play a role. They can act as a shield to filter chatter and play a role in myelin sheaths. Their deterioration in the brain has been finally imaged on newer functional MRI techniques in schizophrenia and Alzheimer's. These gentlemen were being wrongfully diagnosed with some of these other differential diagnoses because of their not understanding. When they looked at this, they didn't have this picture. This is a immunofluorescent tau protein, and you'll hear that throughout the movie. He'll talk about tau protein, and he discovered the tau protein gets in there, and it literally hardens like concrete, and it causes that hardening goes over our synapses, as we were studying between chapter 2 and 3, and that actually causes us to not be able to send signals. It scatters our signals. Best visualization still into 2025 occurs post-mortem. Sadly, we don't have a good way to get in this part of the brain. And he must rely on the rationality to decipher the scientific findings. That is in the chapter application in 13.8. Using all of those, burden of proof, the systematic thought, and they have to go through all of that. And he discovers the cover-up and how their studies were done by a rheumatologist, an Elliot Putman, and he didn't go to American Medical School, even though they were questioning Dr. Omalu's on credentials. Here we're looking at the ethics, career, and going up against NFL conformity and bystander effect biases from Chapter 12, movie themes in 1 through 3. You're going to see the conformity is the pitfall of group or social pressure. The conformity biases operate upon the premises of normative influences, fear of social consequences, and informational influence, looking to others such as guidelines on how to handle ambiguous. That's what the players were doing. They didn't know to go elsewhere or to ask any. And then the bystander effect of no one else is doing anything. It's not popular. I'm not going to do anything. And these are the pitfalls of groupthink. Group polarization from Chapter 12 weighed heavily on the denial, gaslighting, and mistreatment of NFL players suffering from CTE symptoms and their families. And it was a mixture of that. So we can thank Max Wertheimer, 1912, and colleagues in Chapter 4 and Gestsalt School of Thought Principles for cinematography and movies as media that move us and presents persuasive public health messages, because without this technology, this media form would not be possible because it evolved, and we can learn from that in the Chapter 4 and also the application where it went from art into our modern day forms of this.
Those with
I would like you to end with a thought that are in Chapter 12 about using attitudes and persuasive techniques to overcome prejudice and examine our prejudice, and also about how messages are given and received, different sources from judging credibility to also judging what type, like being the media, and what type conveys the most moving, strongest message to you. Also along the lines of what type would make you make the best or change your decision along the lines of Simon and Schwart's theories we are studying this week in Chapter 8. I also want to leave you with the thought of how slippery slope argument themes that Dr. Omalu thought, and also the false dichotomy that the NFL continually withheld within their argument that concussions do not cause the level of damage they do to players. Thank you for watching. End with the references for your viewing.